Hello. Now, today I will be continuing my American battleship line spree, basically, with the New York. The matchmaking is, as you can see, mostly tier 6s. There's like a couple of tier 5s on the enemy team, but the majority are tier 6. I would say this is probably the most common matchmaking you will face as a tier 5. You will face tier 7s every now and then, and you will extremely rarely be matched up against tier 4s. But honestly, being matched up against tier 4s is so incredibly rare that I didn't bother making a commentary on that, because that is certainly an exception. Most of the time though, the majority of your opponents will be tier 6s, like in this game. Now, the first thing you might notice here is, of course, the turret angles. If you have made it past the Wyoming, you should be quite used to this. The turret angles on both the Wyoming and the New York are absolutely dreadful. If I want to use all 5 of my turrets, I have to give pretty much flat broadside to be able to use them. Another difference from the Wyoming is, of course, the increase in reload as well. We have a 34.3 second reload, which is pretty damn terrible. In return though, our dispersion is significantly better. The difference in dispersion between the Wyoming and the New York is significant. You can actually start being a threat at long ranges. Granted, you're not really going to be that big of a threat, and you're still this dispersion is not by any means good in battleship terms, but you can be a threat. You can be a threat at long ranges, and that's significantly more than what you could be in the Wyoming. Now, I'm feeling pretty safe here because I got a Cleveland in front of me, and I got a Kirov in front of me, and I'm thinking there's no way a carrier would fly over the Cleveland to go for me. Little do I know that that's exactly what the enemy carrier is planning to do. He flies right over Cleveland, who for some reason does not pop his defensive AA to farm all these planes. I guess he was not paying attention at all. Usually though, Clevelands tend to be very happy about using that defensive AA, because of course shooting down planes is a really easy way for them to gain a ton of XP. But this Cleveland was too focused on, I don't know, giving broadside to the enemy team and instantly dying. So I'm kind of caught completely by surprise by a carrier pushing straight through and striking me. And I'm forced to turn broadside as I'm avoiding these torpedoes. The carrier was smart enough to drop me from two angles, so I couldn't just turn into the torpedoes. Word of advice though, if you see torpedo bombers coming your way, try to turn into them. This way you will minimize the amount of hits you take. As you can see, the volley I turned into, I only ended up eating 1 of the 4. The volley that was dropped behind me that I turned away from, I ended up eating 2 of the 4, and that's pretty much a pretty good indication of how you might expect that the evading to go. If you turn away, you'll probably eat twice the amount that if you turned into. Now, that of course makes my game a lot harder, because I'm pretty much lost half my health, and I've been forced to use a repair, and my Cleveland and Kirov have both died, and not exactly the most optimal start to any sort of New York game. Worth mentioning is, of course, the anti-air. Don't expect to be shooting down many planes. Those were tier 5 planes, and I'm a tier 5 battleship. Even though the national flavor of the American battleships is the anti-air, as I mentioned in my Wyoming commentary, don't expect that really to become a thing until you hit tier 8, pretty much. Until then, I mean, you get some decent AA before that, of course, but don't expect it really to be anything significant. The AA is very underwhelming. Once again, punishing the Fuso. You might note that I've citadelled this guy earlier, and that's of course Fuso giving broadside is especially vulnerable, and you are able to punish him. The problem is, of course, he doesn't need your broadside to punish you in return. The New York has a lot of superstructure he can hit, and he can just kind of pen you pretty much almost everywhere. I mean, angling of course reduces the damage, but Fuso versus New York isn't exactly a fair fight. He reloads much faster than you, he has more guns than you, he has more health, better armor, all these things. But luckily this guy is giving us a lot of broadside, well he was, and I was able to punish him for it. Now I'm just kiting away though, because well, I want the Dunkirk to kind of be forced into the battle. The Dunkirk has been sitting behind me this entire time, and having him take part in the battle and having him tank a bit as well. Also, the Fuso does give broadside again, so we are probably able to punish him a bit again, which is of course exactly what we want to be doing. In general though, the New York gets punished very hard. if you give broadside. Oh, that was a pretty nice volley actually. 70k on a Fuso at 14 km. It does really show the difference between the Wyoming and the New York in the sense that of how much more long-range threat you gain and how much that improved dispersion really helps you. It might feel like, wow, I had 12 guns on the Wyoming, now I only have 10 guns on the New York, but your actual hit ratio goes up so much when you go from the Wyoming to the New York that it's certainly a significant upgrade. However, the New York is a ship that has... It used to be in a much better state than it is right now, and the reason for that doesn't actually lie in the New York itself. The reason for that lies in all the other ships being added to the game. In fact, the Congo, I always consider the Congo better than the New York. That was always kind of the competition. In the past, there was only the New York as a battleship and the Congo as a battleship, and the Congo was a bit better, and that was kind of the way it went, and that was okay. The Congo was a bit better, but it didn't have as many guns and so forth. But now, with the additions of all these new battleship lines, the New York really does feel kind of like the black sheep of the line. The addition of the Koenig is tanky, it's fast, it's strong, it's just overall better than, I would say, probably the Congo as well. It used to have pretty stupidly good Sigma, but they nerfed the Sigma a bit, but I would still say that it's a very strong ship. So the Koenig was one addition. The Koenig, of course, also has turtleback, so you can't really citadel it either. So that was one addition that made life very hard. Fubuki is pushing in. I'm sailing behind the island. I'm turning away, of course, because if he wants to torpedo me, if you see a DD try to rush you like this, you want to be turning away from him. If he's sailing away from you at 6 km, you want to be chasing him to keep him within your range. But if he's turning towards you, just create more distance. HE might have been useful here, but I was hoping for some good pens. Still though, even AP overpens are a lot of damage to a Fubuki, because I mean, your overpens deal almost 10% of his health, so you don't really need that many hits in order to kill him. Slowing down and turning away, trying to make it hard for him to land his torps, since I am expecting torps here, and as we can see, that's exactly what we see coming our way. He tries to reverse into cover here, but he's not really playing that well at all, and I should be able to kill him, unless of course this other guy, this Ognomoy, who decides to open fire, gets... No, I do finish him off. So that's good. We managed to even the score a bit, but even with all the damage I've been taking and dealing, my team is still losing quite significantly up in the north, which is of course quite a big problem here. Now, where was I? Right, the Koenig. The first introduction of the Koenig already made New York's life quite a lot harder, because not only did you have the Congo that was slightly better than New York, you also had the Koenig now that was slightly better than the New York. And then they added, quite recently, the Iron Duke. Now the Iron Duke isn't slightly better than the New York. The Iron Duke is just straight up better in pretty much every single way. It has so much better armor, it's not even funny. Like, in a straight up armor fight, the Iron Duke is so much more tankier than the New York. So the New York, as I said, tend to eat a lot of these random pens. That doesn't really happen to the Iron Duke. It's a goddamn tank in comparison. The Iron Duke, of course, also has the insane Royal Navy HE, which means if you try to angle against it, I mean, the Iron Duke can straight up just spam HE if you want to. You don't even need to use AP. You can just spam HE at everything, and you will be able to demolish pretty much all your foes. Two of the shells I shoot, I only land 2 of the shells on him, and he of course shatters them both, and that's kind of pretty much what you expect when you're shooting an Iron Duke. The fight between the Iron Duke and the New York is absurdly lopsided. In fact, I did quite recently feature the Iron Duke. I made a commentary on it, and I think it called it something like Power Creep level 11 or something like that. I can't remember what the title was, but if you're interested in how much better the Iron Duke is, just watch that commentary. It shows just how much better it is than the New York in pretty much every single way. And this of course hurts this ship. It hurts it quite a lot. It was already the underdog, I would say, of tier 5. The New York isn't exactly a fun experience, because once again, at tier 5 you'll mostly be facing tier 6s, and now that they've added even stronger tier 5s for it to fight, even if you happen to get absolutely great matchmaking, you're still gonna probably have a rough time. In fact, I would probably face some tier 6s like the Fusa and stuff than be matched up against tier 4s and 5s, which consists of Orions and Iron Dukes. Because at least against the Fuso I can angle and mitigate my damage, whereas an Orion and Iron Duke can pretty much just spam HE and absolutely slaughter the New York without any sort of competition. So once again, life has been rough for the American battleship line. It's not just something that has been affecting the high tiers, but it's something that has been especially affecting these low tiers. And it looks like the carrier is coming back for me. The carrier that kind of wrecked me at the start of the game, he is coming back for me. But this time, I at least have some fighter support. The Bogue actually has his fighters around and is able to help me, it seems. Now, he puts both his fighter squads on the same torpedo squad. Not something I can exactly support, but at least that makes it a lot easier for me, since now we only have one squad we need to worry about. So of course you hold down control and you click the squad that focuses your anti-air on it. Even if you don't have manual AA, focusing a squad increases your AA DPS by 30%, which is good. And of course I turn in towards it. At this point though, he dies, the torpedo planes die, and there's only a bomber squad to deal with. He starts to fire, I instantly repair it. The reason, of course, usually I advise against repairing a single fire, but the only threat here is the Leander, and Leander of course can only shoot AP, so there's no threat of additional fires. The torpedoes, he could launch torpedoes, but at that range unlikely to be hitting any, so I'm quite confident in just repairing the fire and trying to mitigate the damage I take, since this game just got even harder. My last teammate besides the Bogue died, so my only ally right now is an air superiority Bogue, which isn't exactly that good at killing ships, and the enemy still has 6 ships left. So, hard game. Very hard game. Very unlikely to win this game at this point. Not just because pretty much all the ships that they have left are... I think they have pretty much only tier 6 ships left, besides the carrier that's tier 5, but I'm also in a New York, which once again suffers from many of these weaknesses, including, you can see right now, the speed. This I mentioned it in the Wyoming in the introduction, and this is something you're gonna have to get used to. You're not gonna experience any sort of speed in these American battleships until you unlock the North Carolina. The firepower, pretty good. I'm angling in against the Lander. I'm gonna smoke shoot him because, well, he parked next to a landmark, something I highly recommend against. Landmarks help you correct your aim and get the perfect aim on any targets. And of course, since he was just shooting, I know exactly where in the smoke he is, and I will happily open fire on him. Hopefully that will kill him, but instead I get 5 overpens. Not exactly ideal, especially since over-penetrations count as light damage, and light damage can be 100% healed, and the Lander of course has a self-heal, so he's able to heal 100% of the damage he just took. Carrier is actually rushing me at this point. I'm a bit hesitant to shoot the carrier, but since the Leander hasn't been shooting, I don't know if he's moved in the smoke. Yes, he stopped shooting entirely. So I don't know if he's actually moving in the smoke. I don't know if he's torquing me. I have no idea what he's doing. And the Grafspé is so far away and angled in that actually hitting him is unlikely. The easiest and most reliable target to deal damage to is Zuiho, especially considering he's constantly sending planes my way and trying to strike me. So I figured, what the hell, we might as well deal with this threat, not because I would straight up call the Zuiho the biggest threat. Usually when you're in a 1x multiple enemies kind of situation, you deal with the biggest threat first, and if you can't deal with the biggest threat, you deal with the easiest to kill threat. In this case, the Zuiho is not the biggest threat, but he's the easiest to kill threat. So that's why I focus him, and because of the way he angled, I'm able to quite easily arm my AP shells, and I get a lot of pens and a citadel, and I do kill off the Zuiho. The problem is the smoke fades and the Lander pops up, but I'm not entirely certain what happened to this dude. Did he BRB or something? Went AFK for a second? Was he stunned that I hit him 5 times in the smoke? His guns are still turned. Usually if you DC, your guns reset to the default position. So I don't think he's actually DC'd, but I'm not entirely certain what's going on over there. I think he might have just gone AFK or something. Maybe he thought the game was already over, so he could just go AFK while he smoked up and didn't want to risk himself dying. No clue, but I will happily secure that kill. Now once again, the easier to kill threat here the bigger threat here would honestly, and easier to deal with threat here, would be the Aoba. I would love to shoot him. The problem is he's angled and he's at long range, whereas the Grafspé is giving me flat, perfect broadside, and is also a huge threat. So I'm hoping to see if I can maybe Citadel and deal with the Grafspé. Sadly though, dispersion doesn't always work in your favor, and I get no citadels and only deal 5k damage, and I don't really have much health left. I'm trying to kite and trying to get my heal up, but of course the low speed of the New York and the fact that I don't really have much room to kite here. If I try to sail down the border towards the enemy spawn, I'll be giving full broadside to both the Fuso and the Bayern. So there's really no good options left for me. I wait for the Aoba to give full broadside and I shoot him in the hopes of punishing him, but instead I get trolled by dispersion and I get a bounce and 2 over penetrations, and the Aoba survives on 290 in health. That is of course extremely unfortunate, and that unfortunate thing is going to deny me my Kraken, as I'm probably going to burn to death and these shots are going to kill me before I can actually secure my Kraken, which is a shame. So the game does end in our defeat. There wasn't really much I could do to change that, but looking at the score, looking at the end result, 141k damage, 4 kills, 6 citadels, only shot down 3 planes. Once again, this is with a carrier actively striking me, and this is a same tier carrier actively striking a fully upgraded New York. And I only shot down 3 planes even with actively focus firing the squads. So don't expect to shoot down any planes. As I said, the national flavor of anti-air isn't really relevant until the North Carolina. Don't expect to be doing much about any planes until then. Still though, pretty good XP, pretty good credits considering this was a loss as well. In fact, if we look on the detailed, on the team score, you can see that I scored almost 1.6k base XP. In fact, in my tier 5 New York, I actually got more XP than the enemy team's top scorer. And that's of course always very satisfying. Shame that my team kind of collapsed so entirely in the north, because that made the game pretty much impossible for me to turn into a victory, but still being able to get the top score even on the losing team, especially in something like New York, is quite satisfying. Detailed report wise, well, now we're starting to rack up some of that potential damage. We're starting to kind of get into the role of tanking. Once again, the New York isn't really that good of a tank yet. The first time you really start feeling some of that tankiness of a battleship on the American line, I think, is when you unlock the New Mexico. That's when you start feeling like, hey, what the hell? I can actually take these hits and not just melt and disappear. Life was of course made quite a bit harder for me this game because of the carrier strike, especially right at the start when he straight up flew over Cleveland, something that should never be allowed to happen, but it did happen this game because my Cleveland was kind of caught snoozing and just imploded instantly. So that of course made my life a lot harder, but still the 1.4 million potential and a nice chunk of damage, most of it dealt to tier 6s, since that's pretty much what I was fighting in this game. And well, detailed report, I do gain a captain perk from this, which I'm quite happy, even if it was a loss. I'm running of course some bonus XP camos and flags to increase my commander leveling, since this is a completely new captain that I'm leveling for a completely new line, and getting a high point captain as quickly as possible is of course recommended. Anyway, let me show you guys my recommended build. Right, when it comes to the New York, I'll do the same thing that I did with the Wyoming. I'll just jump back a few tiers to show you the upgrade path. Now, on the New York, I will absolutely recommend the hull first. On the Wyoming, it was kind of which one you wanted. Do you want to go speed or hull first? But on New York, it's absolutely the hull first that is the priority. The reason for this is that it gives you so much. It gives you a huge chunk of health. It gives you, I think, does it give you actually, yeah, it gives you AP shell damage as well, and it gives you AA, and it gives you a huge chunk of rudder shift. So these are so many things being given by one single upgrade that it's absolutely worth getting. Once you have the hull upgrade, go for the speed upgrade, and once you have the speed upgrade, go for the range upgrade. The reason, of course, that the range upgrade isn't that much of a priority is because at this point you can slot the range module, the artillery plotting room mod 1, and this is of course something I do highly recommend using on American battleships. I like it on, well, as you can see, I'm still using it on the Colorado, so use it on the New York, New Mexico, and even the Colorado, because this increase in range is extremely helpful and the other perks aren't really that useful at this point. The reason of course I run it on the Colorado is because you end up against tier 9s, and when you do, not having the range can be extremely crippling. But once you get to North Carolina, you have so much range that you want to switch out to the AA. Also, your AA becomes strong enough to justify using it. On the Colorado, it's still pretty questionable if your AA is actually powerful enough to justify slotting the AA guns mod instead of the range. But that's something I'll talk about later. That's of course not relevant to the New York. Once you have, of course, the hull, you go speed and you go range, as I mentioned on the New York. Sorry, wrong ship selected there. Captain perks, I already went over it on the New York, but very simple: priority target, turret reverse, superintendent, concealment, adrenaline rush, and you want to spec into fire prevention as soon as possible. If you can't get fire prevention, as I can't, then you get space survivability. If you can't get that, as I can't because my captain is too low tier, then you get high alert. But ultimately, of course, the goal is to spec towards the fire prevention. Alternatively, you can spec towards AFT, but I don't think there's enough carriers to justify speccing that. Although running it on the NC is pretty damn fun because you absolutely murder planes left, right and center, but that's something that's quite far in the future if you're still at the New York. Flags, same as all battleships: healing, fire reduction in fire duration, and faster consumable usage. Speed, I like running simply because they're so slow, but it's a percentage based buff, so a small percentage of garbage is still going to be quite garbage, so probably not worth wasting flags if you don't have many of them. Anyway, that was my New York commentary, and as I said, I'm moving through this line quite quickly, and well, it was the line that I was asked to level on the Russian server, and it's the line that I'm going to be continuing leveling all the way to the Montana. I hope you guys enjoyed this short New York commentary.